Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into English idioms.
Okay.
Those colorful phrases that add a little spice to everyday language.
Yeah.
And we've got a stack of articles and research on the topic, and our mission is to help you truly understand these quirks of English.
Sounds good.
Why does this matter? Well, think about it. Idioms are everywhere. They pop up in conversations, movies, even song lyrics.
Yeah.
So whether you're brushing up on your English skills or just want to decode those cryptic sayings,
Right.
this deep dive is for you.
Absolutely.
What's fascinating about idioms is that they often don't make sense if you translate them literally.
That is true.
They represent a deeper layer of cultural understanding, reflecting shared experiences and values within a language community.
Yeah, it's like you can learn all the grammar rules in the world, but without a grasp of idioms, you'll still miss those subtle nuances that make English sound truly natural.
So let's break this down a bit.
Okay.
First things first.
Yeah.
What exactly is an idiom?
An idiom is a group of words that has a figurative meaning separate from the literal meaning of the individual words. For example, kick the bucket doesn't actually involve any kicking or buckets.
Right.
It's a way of saying someone has died, but in a more indirect, almost humorous way.
Yeah, it's like a secret code that native English speakers use to communicate beyond the surface level. But for someone learning English, I can see how it would be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
Where do you even start with all these quirky phrases?
Well, I think starting with common idioms is key.
Okay.
You don't need to memorize every single one.
Right.
Focus on those you hear often, like break the ice,
Yeah.
which means to start a conversation,
Right.
or piece of cake, which means something is easy.
That makes sense. Start with the essentials and build from there.
Yeah.
The source material also had some good tips about grouping idioms by theme.
Absolutely. Grouping by theme can be incredibly helpful for learning and recall.
Okay.
You could have a group for time idioms, like once in a blue moon for something rare,
Okay.
or kill two birds with one stone for accomplishing multiple tasks efficiently.
Right.
Or you could group idioms related to emotions, like over the moon for feeling extremely happy,
Yeah.
or down in the dumps for feeling sad.
I love that idea. It's like creating little mental maps for these idiomatic expressions.
Right.
But even if you memorize a bunch of idioms, I'm guessing it's not enough to just rattle them off, right?
Right. The key is to understand how to use them appropriately in different contexts.
Okay.
For example,
Right.
you wouldn't use the idiom barking up the wrong tree in a formal business meeting,
Yeah.
but it might be perfect for a casual conversation with friends.
Okay, so context is crucial. And what about using idioms from your native language in English conversations? Is that ever a good idea?
That's where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
While it's tempting to translate idioms directly,
Right.
they often don't carry the same meaning or cultural weight in another language. You might end up confusing people, or even saying something unintentionally humorous.
So it's all about learning idioms within the context of the English language and culture.
Right.
Not just trying to find direct equivalents.
Yeah.
Now let's get into some real-life examples to see how these idioms play out in action.
Okay.
Shall we?
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Perfect. We've already touched on break the ice, but let's explore that one a bit further.
Okay.
It's one of those idioms you hear all the time.
Break the ice is all about easing tension and starting a conversation.
Yeah.
Imagine you're at a networking event and you spot someone standing alone.
Okay.
You can approach them and say,
Yeah.
"Hi, it's a bit quiet in here, isn't it? Have you heard any interesting talks so far?"
Right.
That's breaking the ice. You've initiated a conversation and hopefully made the other person feel more comfortable.
It's like that initial awkwardness is a metaphorical wall of ice, and you're using your words to create a crack in it,
Yeah.
opening up the possibility for connection.
And what's interesting is that this idiom highlights how language reflects cultural values. In English-speaking cultures, small talk is often seen as a crucial first step in building rapport.
Right.
So break the ice perfectly captures that social necessity.
That's such a great insight. It's not just about the words themselves,
Yeah.
but also about understanding the cultural context in which they're used.
Right.
Okay, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about an idiom that's often used in situations where someone's feeling a little under the weather.
Ah, yes. Under the weather.
Yeah.
A classic way to say you're not feeling well.
Right.
It's much more expressive than just saying I'm sick, isn't it?
Yeah.
It evokes a sense of being weighed down as if the weather itself is affecting your health.
I like how you pointed out that sense of being weighed down.
Mm-hmm.
It adds a layer of depth to the expression.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling a bit sniffly, you could say to your friend, I'm feeling a bit under the weather today, so I might skip our gym session.
Exactly. And they'll immediately understand what you mean,
Right.
without you having to go into detail about your symptoms.
Right.
It's a quick and efficient way to communicate how you're feeling.
Speaking of efficiency, let's move on to an idiom that's all about getting things done.
Okay.
Kill two birds with one stone.
This is a favorite for anyone who loves multitasking.
Yeah.
It means to accomplish two goals with a single action,
Right.
which is something we all strive for in our busy lives.
It paints such a vivid picture, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, imagine you need to pick up groceries and also drop off a package at the post office.
Okay.
If both are located near each other,
Right.
you could say, I'll kill two birds with one stone by running those errands together.
Exactly. You're being efficient with your time and effort, accomplishing two tasks in one go.
And I think this idiom also reflects a certain cultural value of practicality and resourcefulness. It's like we're always looking for ways to maximize our time and effort to get the most out of every action.
That's a really perceptive observation. It shows how idioms can provide a window into the underlying values and priorities of a culture.
I love how we're uncovering these deeper layers of meaning.
Right.
It's making me appreciate idioms even more.
Yeah.
Okay, for our next example,
Okay.
let's delve into a situation where you might need to give someone some tough love.
Okay.
Bite the bullet.
Bite the bullet. This one's all about facing something unpleasant or difficult head on.
Right.
It implies a sense of courage and determination to just get it over with.
It makes me think of those old war movies.
Yeah.
Where they'd give soldiers a bullet to bite down on during surgery without anesthetic.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you know it's going to be painful, but you steel yourself and just do it.
Exactly. So let's say you've been putting off a difficult conversation with a coworker,
Okay.
but you know it needs to happen.
Right.
You could say to yourself, all right, time to bite the bullet and have that talk.
It's a way of psyching yourself up for a challenging situation.
Right.
It's like saying, let's just get this over with no matter how unpleasant it might be.
Yeah.
And finally, let's round out this segment with an idiom that's all about having a stroke of luck.
Okay.
Hit the jackpot.
Hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love that feeling?
Yeah.
It evokes a sense of sudden and unexpected success, or achieving something you never thought possible.
It paints such a vivid picture of good fortune, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Imagine you've been working on a project for months,
Uh-huh.
and it finally gets approved by your boss.
Okay.
You could say, I hit the jackpot. All that hard work finally paid off.
Exactly. It's like all the stars aligned in your favor and you achieved a major win. It's a great way to express that feeling of exhilaration and accomplishment.
I love how idioms can capture those complex emotions so succinctly. They add a layer of color and personality to our language that simple words sometimes can't convey.
I couldn't agree more. Idioms are like little linguistic treasures,
Yeah.
each one with its own story to tell.
This has been fascinating.
Yeah.
We've covered some common idioms and really started to understand how they work in everyday conversations. But I think we've only scratched the surface, haven't we?
Definitely.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore in the world of idioms.
Okay.
But before we dive deeper, how about we put your knowledge to the test with a little idiom quiz?
All right. Are you ready to put your idiom knowledge to the test?
I'm ready when you are.
Okay, first up, the idiom is spill the beans.
Okay.
What do you think it means? And can you come up with an example of how you might use it in a sentence?
Spill the beans. I'm picturing someone clumsily knocking over a bowl of beans. Maybe it's a metaphor for making a mess of things.
You're getting close. Spill the beans actually means to reveal a secret, often accidentally.
Yeah.
Like imagine you're planning a surprise party for a friend, and someone accidentally lets the information slip.
Ooh.
You could say, oh no, you spilled the beans. Now the surprise is ruined.
Oh, I see. It's like the secret was contained in those beans?
Yeah.
And now it's all over the place.
Exactly. All right, ready for the next challenge?
Hit me with it.
Okay, this one is a bit trickier. Barking up the wrong tree. Any thoughts on this one?
Barking up the wrong tree. Okay. I'm visualizing a dog barking excitedly at a tree, but there's nothing actually there.
Okay.
Maybe it means to be mistaken or to be pursuing a false lead.
You nailed it. Barking up the wrong tree means to be pursuing a line of thought or action that is incorrect or unlikely to lead to success. It's like you're focusing your energy in the wrong direction.
So if someone is convinced that a particular suspect committed a crime,
Mm,
but all the evidence points elsewhere, you could say they're barking up the wrong tree.
precisely. And what's interesting about this idiom is that it actually has historical roots in hunting.
Oh.
Back in the day, hunting dogs would sometimes chase prey up a tree,
Uh-huh.
only to discover that the animal had already escaped or was hiding in a different tree.
That's fascinating. I love how idioms often have these historical or cultural backstories that add another layer of meaning.
All right, last idiom challenge. Are you ready?
Bring it on.
Okay, the idiom is see eye to eye. What does it mean, and how would you use it in a sentence?
See eye to eye. Well, I'm picturing two people looking directly at each other,
Okay.
maybe in agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking it means to agree with someone or to share the same perspective.
You are absolutely right. See eye to eye means to agree with someone often on a particular issue or decision.
Okay.
So if you and a colleague are working on a project and you both have the same vision for how it should be executed,
Right.
you could say, we see eye to eye on this project, which makes collaboration so much easier.
That's a great example. It really captures the essence of shared understanding and agreement that the idiom conveys.
Well done. You aced our idiom quiz. It seems like you're really starting to grasp these nuances of English.
Thanks. I'm finding these idioms to be incredibly interesting,
Sure.
and I appreciate how you're breaking them down in a way that's both informative and engaging.
You're welcome. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about some common mistakes that people make with idioms. I think it's important to be aware of these potential pitfalls so we can avoid them.
Absolutely. Even though idioms can be fun and expressive, they can also be tricky if you don't use them correctly.
One of the most common mistakes is using idioms out of context. It's like wearing a swimsuit to a formal dinner. It just doesn't fit the situation.
Exactly. Idioms have very specific meanings and connotations, and they need to be used in appropriate settings.
Right.
For example, you wouldn't say break a leg to someone who's about to undergo a serious medical procedure.
Yeah, that would be wildly inappropriate. Break a leg is meant to be a lighthearted way to wish someone good luck, not to tempt fate in a situation where someone's health is at stake.
Right, so it's crucial to pay attention to how native speakers use idioms in different contexts and try to mimic those patterns.
Yeah.
Don't just assume that an idiom that sounds good in one situation will work in another.
Another common mistake is overusing idioms. It's like trying to show off your vocabulary by cramming in as many big words as possible. It just ends up sounding forced and unnatural.
Exactly. Sprinkle idioms into your conversation sparingly, like adding a pinch of salt to a dish.
Yeah.
Too much, and it overwhelms the flavor.
I like that analogy. It's all about finding the right balance. You want to use idioms to enhance your communication, not to dominate it.
Another mistake people make is taking idioms too literally.
Hmm.
It's important to remember that idioms are figurative expressions, not literal descriptions.
Mm.
For instance, if someone says they're feeling blue, it doesn't mean their skin has turned blue. It simply means they're feeling sad.
Right. It's like trying to solve a riddle by focusing on the literal meaning of each word rather than looking for the hidden meaning behind the words.
Precisely. And finally, one of the biggest mistakes is translating idioms directly from your native language into English.
Right.
As we discussed earlier, idioms are often culturally specific, and their meanings don't always translate directly.
Yeah.
You might end up saying something that doesn't make sense or even something offensive.
So the key takeaway here is to learn idioms in English and focus on understanding their meaning and usage within the context of the English language. Right.
Don't rely on direct translations. They'll often lead you astray.
That's such an important point. It's all about immersing yourself in the language and culture to truly grasp the nuances of idiomatic expressions.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground today, from understanding what idioms are to learning how to use them effectively, and even identifying some common mistakes to avoid. But I'm curious, what are some practical tips for making idioms a habit?
Yeah.
How can we integrate them into our daily English practice?
That's a great question. One tip I always recommend is to start small.
Okay.
Choose a few common idioms that you like and focus on mastering those.
Right.
Don't try to learn everything at once. That's a recipe for overwhelm.
I like that approach. Start small and build from there. It's like building a muscle.
Yeah.
You wouldn't try to lift the heaviest weight right away, would you? Exactly. Start with a manageable weight and gradually increase it as you get stronger. The same applies to learning idioms. And another helpful tip is to create flashcards with idioms on one side and their meanings in example sentences on the other. It's a great way to quiz yourself and reinforce your learning.
That's a classic study technique, but it's effective for a reason. It's like having a portable idiom dictionary at your fingertips.
And don't forget the power of context. Pay attention to how native speakers use idioms in movies, TV shows, books, and even songs. It's a fantastic way to learn new idioms and see how they're used naturally.
It's like turning everyday activities into idiom learning opportunities. You're constantly exposed to the language and how it's used in real-life situations.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all part of the learning process. The more you use idioms, the more comfortable and confident you'll become.
That's such an important reminder. We all make mistakes, especially when learning a new language. The key is to embrace those mistakes as opportunities for growth and not let them discourage us.
Well said. And remember, learning idioms is an ongoing journey. There's always more to learn and discover.
This has been a truly enlightening deep dive into the world of English idioms. We've
Yeah.
covered a lot of ground, and I feel like I've gained a much deeper understanding of these fascinating linguistic gems.
I've enjoyed our conversation immensely. It's always rewarding to delve into the intricacies of language and explore the ways in which it shapes our communication and understanding of the world.
And as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave our listeners with a little something to ponder.
Okay.
Think about some of the idioms in your own native language.
Mhm.
I bet there are some real gems that would sound pretty strange if translated directly into English.
Yeah.
What are some of those?
That's such a fun thought experiment. It
Yeah.
really highlights how idioms are deeply rooted in a culture's unique perspective and way of expressing ideas.
It's like each language has its own set of secret codes and inside jokes.
Exactly. And trying to decode those idioms from another culture can be both challenging and incredibly rewarding.
So to all our listeners out there, I challenge you to keep exploring the wonderful world of English idioms. Don't be afraid to use them, play with them, and even try to figure out where they come from.
And remember, the more you engage with idioms, the more you'll unlock the richness and beauty of the English language.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the wonderfully weird and wacky world of English idioms. We hope you've learned some new phrases and had a bit of fun along the way. Until next time, happy idiom hunting. I bet there are some real gems out there
Yeah.
that would sound pretty strange if translated directly into English.
hmm
What are some of those?
That's such a fun thought experiment. It really highlights how idioms are deeply rooted in a culture's unique perspective and way of expressing ideas.
It's like each language has its own set of secret codes and inside jokes.
Exactly. And trying to decode those idioms from another culture can be both challenging and incredibly rewarding.
So to all our listeners out there, I
Yeah.
challenge you to keep exploring the wonderful world of English idioms. Don't be afraid to use them.
Mhm.
Play with them. Right.
And even try to figure out where they come from.
Yeah.
And remember,
Mm-hmm.
the more you engage with idioms,
Yes.
the more you'll unlock the richness and beauty of the English language.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the wondrously weird and wacky world of English idioms. We hope you've learned some new phrases and had a bit of fun along the way. Until next time, happy idiom hunting.